You find yourself standing in the heart of medieval London, though to use the word heart is almost misleading. The city breathes, yes, but each breath seems to wheeze through layers of smoke, river mist, and the sour stench of human activity. As you look around, you understand quickly why London, even in its early development, earned a reputation for being one of the dirtiest and most uncomfortable places to live in all of medieval Europe. The ground beneath your feet is not solid in the way you might expect. It is not simply soil or cobblestone, nor the hard-packed earth of a rural village road. Instead, you stand in a mixture of mud, waste, splintered straw, and debris, an ever-shifting surface the locals refer to simply as mire. When you walk, your feet produce a thick, sucking sound, as though the earth itself begrudges your movement. And this, you soon realize, is not due to any particular rainstorm. This is London's ground on most days of the year. The reason for this is easy to find. The open sewage channels that line the streets. They sit like shallow, slow-moving scars in the earth, ditches deliberately left unfilled to carry a mixture of waste toward the Thames. These channels, known as gutters or kennels, are not hidden underground. They are not enclosed pipes, nor are they carefully engineered systems meant to improve sanitation. Instead, they are open, plain to see, unavoidable in both function and odour. You pause beside one such gutter. A thin rivulet of greyish-brown liquid meanders through it, carrying straw scraps, rotting vegetable peels, and, occasionally, far worse things, discarded chamber, pot contents, dead animals, and spoiled food. In the early morning, city officials known as rakers attempt to clear the worst of it, shoveling muck onto carts and moving it beyond the city walls. But their efforts are never enough. By midday, the channels swamp again, with filth. Living beside such conditions shapes daily life in ways that are easy to overlook from a modern perspective. For instance, your sense of smell never truly escapes the constant sour odour. Even indoors, the smell creeps beneath doors and through shutter cracks. Clothing absorbs it. Food, especially if stored improperly, mingles with it. The very air tastes faintly of smoke, waste, and river moisture, blending into something uniquely London, something you cannot quite describe, except to say that it lingers. As you walk, you pass rows of timber-framed houses leaning toward the street as if in conversation with one another. The second and third stories of these homes are built larger than their ground floors, jutting outward overhead. This medieval design makes the street feel more enclosed, almost tunnel-like, while simultaneously reducing the amount of sky you can see. For the residents, it provides additional living space, but for the street below, it traps odours and shadows. Only narrow ribbons of daylight slip between the buildings, illuminating drifting smoke from hearth fires and the occasional motes of dust kicked up by passing animals. And the animals are always present. Even a wealthier district in medieval London is never free of livestock. Chickens wander the streets, their feathers matted from the damp. Dogs nose through piles of refuse, occasionally growling at one another over scraps. Pigs roam with surprising confidence, especially near the markets, where butcher waste offers a steady source of food. These animals aren't merely a nuisance, they are part of the city's ecology, consuming what human waste systems cannot handle. Their presence is a sign of both survival and decay. As you make your way closer to the Thames, the air shifts. The river's scent blends with the existing odours, adding its own mixture of mud, algae, and brackish water. The Thames is both London's lifeline and one of its greatest challenges. It brings goods, trade, and wealth into the city, and yet it also receives much of the city's waste. You watch as a barge moves slowly upstream, the rower's motions steady and practiced. Behind it, the water churns slightly, carrying driftwood, refuse, and unknown objects beneath its cloudy surface. Along the riverbanks, you notice groups of washerwomen bent over the water, scrubbing linen against wooden boards. Their hands move methodically, though you can imagine how the cold must settle deep into their bones during autumn and winter. Their work is monotonous and difficult, and yet essential. For many households, washing clothing or linens at home is impractical due to lack of clean water, and yet the irony is palpable. The river where they wash garments is the same river that receives waste from the city. Daily survival in London hinges on routines such as these, unremarkable habits shaped by necessity. Food, for example, is purchased daily by most common families, not stored for long periods. Without proper preservation, even the simplest ingredients spoil quickly. You pass by a market stall where a vendor sells onions, leeks, dried peas, and a few shriveled apples. The vendor calls out to potential buyers in a repetitive chant, his voice blending into the endless hum of market chatter. Bartering is common, and transactions move quickly. Everyone knows that food left unsold at day's end may need to be discarded. As you watch, a young boy carries a wooden bucket toward one of the public wells. Water collection is another central part of daily life, though the well water is not always clean. Contamination occurs easily, especially in densely populated districts. You notice the way the boy struggles with the bucket's weight once it is full, the strain on his small body unmistakable, and you understand that he will repeat this task at least several times today. Water, despite the Thames flowing so close, is a resource that must be earned through effort. Inside the city, the noise never truly stops. Carriages rattle over stones, merchants shout, church bells ring, and the constant shuffle of footsteps creates a steady rhythm. But these sounds pale in comparison to the bang of blacksmiths' forges, the ringing of metal on metal echoing through certain streets. Even from a distance, you can sense the heat radiating from their shops, mingling with the cold drafts that sweep through alleyways. You take a moment to observe one of these workshops. The smith works with deliberate precision, raising his hammer and striking the glowing metal in front of him. Sparks scatter with each hit. The glow fades a little more each time until the smith must return the iron to the coals. This kind of work is essential for city life. Iron tools, nails, hinges, and weapons all come through the hands of men like him. But it is also exhausting, dangerous, and often shortens lifespans due to inhaled smoke and heat exposure. The deeper you look into medieval London, the more you begin to understand that the city's difficulties are numerous, but they are not merely the product of poverty or negligence. They are built into the fabric of medieval urban living. Population growth outpaced sanitation systems. Trade brought wealth, but also congestion. Narrow streets trapped smoke. Open sewers mingled with daily activity. The mixture of noise, filth, and survival efforts created a city that was both vibrant and exhausting, dangerous and essential. And yet, despite all of these challenges, people continued to live here. They raised families, practiced trades, worshipped, and built community. Human resilience, in this case, is not expressed through great heroism, but through the quiet persistence of daily life. The decision to stay, to endure the mud, the smell, the crowded streets. These choices shaped London into the powerful city it would eventually become. When you return to the streets of medieval London in the next part of the story, the city feels a little more familiar, though not any cleaner. The smell still clings to the air. The mud underfoot still gives that same heavy tug, and the constant movement of people, animals, and carts forms a steady current, as though the city itself is a river whose flow never stops. But now, instead of simply observing, you begin to notice the rhythm of labor and survival that governs nearly every aspect of daily life. London, in the Middle Ages, is not a place where anyone sits idle for long. Work is the center of existence, and for most residents, work is done not in the privacy of quiet shops or workshops, but directly on the street, in full view of neighbors, travelers, and customers. The boundary between public and private life is porous. Everything spills outward. Sounds, smells, conversations, disputes. bargains. You can watch the life of a household by simply standing near its door. As morning settles into the city, merchants begin arranging their wares outside their homes. Goods are displayed on wooden boards or hung on nails in door frames. Some vendors bring small handcarts, their wheels caked with old mud from countless journeys between market spaces. Others simply sit on low stools beside baskets, ready to sell thread, herbs, cheap pottery, or fruit to passing customers. Every transaction is small, but every coin matters. You pause at a shop where a cooper, someone who makes barrels, has begun assembling wooden staves beside the street. Cooperage is one of the essential trades in the city. Barrels hold everything: ale, fish, salted meats, vinegar, grain. Without them, trade would slow to a crawl. The cooper's hands work with practiced efficiency. He checks the curve of each stave, trims edges with a small knife, and fits them together with iron hoops. You sense the subtle tension in his movements. A single mistake means wasted material, lost time, and perhaps the need to negotiate with an irritated merchant waiting for his barrels. Further down the street, you encounter another form of craft. One, far less orderly. A tanner's workshop sits just beyond the main road, tucked into an alley where the air smells distinctly of urine, rotting hides, and smoke. Tanners are necessary for making leather, but the process is so unpleasant that few people willingly spend time near their workspaces. The hides soak in pits filled with caustic mixtures, and the tanner uses a scraping tool to remove hair and grime. The odor is unmistakable, biting at your nose and settling heavily in your throat. Yet this workshop represents something important: survival through labor, however unpleasant. The tanner's livelihood depends on tolerating the smells that everyone else avoids. And his customers, shoemakers, saddle makers, glove makers, depend on his work as well. The city's interconnected trades form a vast web where each profession supports the others, often in invisible ways. You continue walking until you reach a section of the city where the butchers operate. Here, the atmosphere feels almost chaotic. The carcasses of animals hang from wooden beams, and the ground beneath your feet is slick with a combination of water, blood, and fat. A butcher uses a cleaver to separate ribs from a carcass, each strike rhythmic and precise. Stray dogs roam nearby, hopeful for a dropped scrap. Even pigs, semi-wild and accustomed to city life, sniff and grunt at the edges of the workspace. Butchery is vital to London's food supply, but it introduces major challenges. Waste must be disposed of quickly, or the smell of rot competes with the ever-present stench of the street. Some of the scraps go to animal feed, some to poorer families who cannot afford prime cuts, and the rest is often dumped in the river or left for scavengers. The city's survival depends on a fragile balance between use and waste, necessity and filth. As you take in the noise of cleavers, the calls of vendors, and the chatter of customers, you begin to understand that medieval London is more than a city of mud, sewage. It is a living machine of interdependent systems. And yet, for all its industry, life here is far from easy. Consider the daily routine of an ordinary Londoner. A baker, for instance, wakes long before dawn. Bread is the core of medieval diets, and demand never ends. By the time the city stirs awake, he has already stoked his ovens, kneaded dough, and formed loaves. You smell the faint, comforting aroma of baking bread as you pass one such shop. But don't let the pleasant smell fool you. The bakery is hot, cramped, and smoky, and a fatigued baker might go days with barely any sleep. Furthermore, bakers are regulated heavily by local authorities. If a loaf is too small or underweight, the baker risks fines or punishment. Across the street, a group of apprentices carries bundles of firewood. Apprentice life is its own kind of struggle. These young people, usually boys in their early teens, but sometimes younger, sleep in workshop lofts, eat whatever meals their masters provide, and work long hours learning a trade. Their future depends entirely on the skill they can cultivate under strict supervision. They are often treated little better than servants, yet for many families, apprenticeship offers the only path to improved status. As you observe these apprentices, you realize how hierarchical city life truly is. The guild system shapes nearly every craft. Bakers, butchers, weavers, blacksmiths, carpenters, all operate under guild rules, determining how, when, and where they work. These regulations protect quality, but also restrict competition. To become a master craftsman, one must not only demonstrate skill, but pay substantial fees, obtain approval, and often wait for years. For ordinary workers, this system can feel suffocating, but for the city as a whole, it keeps essential trades functioning. By midday, the streets grow more crowded. Carts push through, carrying goods brought by river barge. Fishermen sell eels and river fish from wicker baskets. Women selling cooked pies shout their offerings, though you'd hesitate to examine the ingredients too closely. In many pies, questionable meats are hidden beneath thick crusts. But in a world without refrigeration, food safety is a daily gamble. Children dart between adults with surprising agility. Some play with small wooden toys, others assist their families with errands. Childhood in medieval London is brief. Illness is common, work begins early, and most children grow up witnessing the harsh realities of life. Yet laughter still echoes through the streets. Even here, in one of the worst places to live by modern standards, you find moments of humanity, simple joys carved out between hardship. As you make your way toward one of the city's religious centers, the sound of church bells interrupts the bustle. Their ringing marks the hours, calling the faithful to prayer. Daily life revolves around these bells, acting as a communal clock. Londoners listen instinctively, adjusting their routines as the bells signal morning mass, midday prayer, or the approach of evening. Inside the church precinct, the atmosphere shifts dramatically. The noises of the street fade, and the thick stone walls offer a sense of calm. You see people kneeling in prayer, merchants, widows, travelers, craftsmen. Religion permeates every corner of life, providing structure, hope, and an explanation for circumstances that otherwise feel unbearable. Illness, poverty, misfortune, all are understood through a lens of divine will. Outside again, you find yourself near the city's poorer districts. Here, the homes are smaller, more cramped, and more unstable. Roofs leak, walls lean precariously. Smoke from indoor fires escapes through tiny openings in the roof, filling the air with constant haze. In these neighborhoods, survival feels even more fragile. Many families share beds, or even rooms, with strangers. Furniture is sparse, belongings are few. Illness spreads quickly. Despite the hardship, you notice a striking feature. Community bonds run strong. Neighbors share food when possible, watch each other's children, and help with repairs. These relationships form an invisible safety net, allowing families to endure challenges that would be impossible alone. If someone falls ill, a neighbor may fetch water. If someone dies, the community helps bury them. These acts of solidarity, small as they may seem, are essential for survival. As afternoon light softens, you pass by a group of rakers, the city workers responsible for cleaning the streets. Their job is immense, and they are often overwhelmed. They push carts filled with refuse toward the city gates, dumping the waste into designated pits outside the walls, but the work never truly ends. By the time one street is cleared, another has been fouled again. Yet the rakers continue, driven by necessity, by wages, and perhaps by a sense of civic duty. You pause to watch as one raker uses a long tool to drag debris away from a clogged gutter. The liquid flows again, slowly, reluctantly. It is a small improvement, but in a city that constantly threatens to overwhelm its inhabitants, even minor victories matter. Toward evening, the city changes once more. Workers return home. Marketplaces close, and inns fill with travellers seeking warmth and food. The smell of cooked stews wafts from open doors, simple meals of barley, peas, onions, and occasionally salted meat. Lanterns flicker to life, shadows lengthen. But even as darkness gathers, the dangers of city living do not subside. Thieves prowl back alleys. Fires break out unexpectedly, fueled by timber buildings packed closely together. Law enforcement exists, but its reach is limited. Curfews are enacted in some districts, and watchmen patrol the streets, carrying lanterns and staffs. Yet no one truly feels safe. As you stand on a wooden bridge overlooking the Thames, the water dark and sluggish beneath you, you realize that living in medieval London means accepting constant discomfort, but it also means participating in the creation of a city that will grow into one of the world's most influential centers. The people who endure the mud, the noise, the stench, and the danger contribute, in their own quiet way, to the shaping of history. As you return to medieval London for the final section of this story, the city greets you with its now familiar mixture of noise, mud, smoke, and human presence. Yet something feels different this time, not because the streets are cleaner or the air fresher, but because you finally sense the underlying structure that holds this chaotic world together. Beneath the grime and disorder lies an astonishing capacity for adaptation, one that allowed London not only to endure, but to grow. To understand this resilience, you must first consider the harshest and most constant threat of medieval urban life: illness. Disease is woven into the daily experience of Londoners, always lurking, always waiting. It is not a matter of if, but when someone will fall ill. And in a city where open sewers run beside homes, where contaminated water is a daily risk, and where animals wander freely through crowded streets, sickness spreads quickly. One of the most common afflictions is intestinal disease. Fevers, cramps, and dehydration, caused by contaminated food or water. These illnesses strike people of all ages, and though many recover, the weakest often do not. Children are particularly vulnerable. You witness a mother carrying a pale, lethargic child through a marketplace, hoping to find an herbalist who might know a remedy. The vendors glance sympathetically, but no one is surprised. Illness is a thread woven through the life of the city, always present, rarely discussed, with fear more with resignation. Respiratory diseases are another pervasive threat. The smoke from hearth, fires, forges, and bakeries fills the air each day, settling into lungs and throats. Chronic coughs are common. You hear them everywhere, echoing in alleys, sounding from upper windows, interrupting conversations. The wet, chilly climate of London, coupled with poor insulation in homes, further contributes to endless colds, fevers, and chest infections. As you walk through one of the city's poorer districts, you encounter a small family crowded into a single-room dwelling. The father works as a labourer along the riverfront. The mother takes in mending. Their children sleep on straw-filled mats. There is little ventilation, and the smoke from their cooking fire lingers in the room long after the flame dies out. You can understand how such an environment, shared by countless families, feeds a continuous cycle of illness that shapes the rhythm of their lives. Yet illness, for all its suffering, is only one part of the story. The people of medieval London have their ways of coping not through modern medicine, but through daily practices, traditions, and social networks that provide support in subtle and deeply human ways. Herbal remedies are everywhere. Wise women, apothecaries, and travelling healers offer mixtures of horehound, thyme, yarrow, fennel, and other herbs known to ease fevers or soothe stomach aches. These remedies are imperfect, but they offer comfort. In the calmer corners of the city, monastery infirmaries provide rest and basic care, drawing on centuries of medical writings, some dating back to ancient Rome and Greece. There is no guarantee of recovery, but there is sincere, continuous effort to ease suffering. Another coping mechanism lies in communal rituals. When sickness spreads, Londoners turn to the church. They light candles for afflicted loved ones, join processions, and pray for deliverance. These acts do not cure disease, but they offer emotional structure and a sense of control. Spiritual explanations fill the gaps left by limited medical knowledge. Illness is often interpreted as punishment, trial, or providence, a divine message that must be understood and endured. It is easy from a modern perspective to dismiss these beliefs, but within the context of medieval life, they form part of a psychological framework that helps people manage uncertainty. Prayer offers a place to channel fear. Ritual creates order. Community provides connection. As you continue exploring the city, you encounter another essential aspect of resilience: labor diversification. In an environment where illness, injury, or misfortune can end a livelihood, families develop multiple skills to survive. A carpenter might also keep bees. A cooper might fish during certain seasons. Women often balance household duties with textile work, brewing, or selling low-cost goods. Children help with errands, care for siblings, or perform small tasks for neighbors. This flexibility strengthens the social fabric. It ensures that when one source of income falters, another might keep the household afloat. You watch as a group of women gather in a courtyard to spin wool. Their voices carry across the space, soft and steady. This spinning is not glamorous, but it is stable work, and through it, families gain a modest degree of security. Seasonal rhythms also influence resilience. The needs of summer differ from those of winter. In the warm months, the river becomes a vital artery for trade. Fishermen haul in eels and smelt. Farmers bring produce to market. Builders repair roofs and streets. In winter, activity slows. Families rely on preserved foods, salted fish, dried peas, stored grains. They gather firewood. They prepare for long nights and cold winds that slip through the cracks of timber houses. Despite the hardships, there is a certain predictability to this cycle, and predictability can be reassuring. Even in a city built on uncertainty, people cling to routines that offer structure and meaning. As you move toward the city's heart again, you encounter an unexpected contrast: the presence of wealth. London is not entirely poor. Merchants, moneylenders, and aldermen live in larger homes with stone foundations and glass windows. Their streets are somewhat cleaner, their water supplies more reliable, their meals more varied. Yet even these wealthier districts cannot escape disease or fire. Status provides comfort, but not immunity. You witness a merchant inspecting bolts of cloth imported from Flanders. His shop is filled with colours: deep reds, soft blues, rich greens, dyes too expensive for most residents. His family enjoys bread made with finer flour, meat more often, and an abundance of imported goods. And yet, just outside his door, a gutter of grey water runs steadily. The same flies that swarm around stalls in poorer districts buzz here as well. His carefully washed linens dry in the same smoky air. This juxtaposition illustrates a key truth. Medieval London is a city of close proximity. The wealthy and poor share the same streets, air, and rivers. Disaster does not discriminate by class. Fire can leap from one roof to the next in minutes. Disease crosses thresholds with ease. In moments of crisis, the entire city is vulnerable. The fear of fire is constant, and for good reason. You recall a narrow street you passed earlier, lined with timber-framed houses whose upper stories lean so close they nearly touch. A single spark from a hearth or forge could ignite a blaze that spreads uncontrollably. To manage this threat, households store water in buckets. Nightly watchmen patrol for signs of danger. The city enforces rules about building materials, though enforcement is inconsistent. Even with precautions, fires occur regularly. Each one becomes a reminder of the fragility of urban life. Yet each time disaster strikes, the city rebuilds. People salvage stones, reuse timber, and start again. Londoners are accustomed to rebuilding not out of heroism, but out of necessity. This repeated cycle of destruction and reconstruction becomes another reflection of resilience. Perhaps the clearest symbol of medieval London's endurance lies in its markets. Despite illness, filth, and danger, the marketplaces hum with an energy that hints at possibility. Goods from distant lands arrive by river and road. Wool from the English countryside, spices from the Levant, furs from the Baltic, wine from France. London, for all its difficulties, is growing. People from nearby villages migrate here seeking opportunity. Craftsmen establish workshops, merchants accumulate wealth, travelers pass through, bringing news and stories that connect London to a wider world. This sense of motion, of movement and exchange keeps the city alive. London is dirty, crowded, and often miserable, but it is also a place where a determined individual might carve out a modest but meaningful life. As evening settles again, you find yourself standing beside the Thames. Lantern light flickers on the surface of the river. Boats drift slowly past, their silhouettes faint against the dark water. Behind you, the city murmurs a softened version of its daytime noise. People settle into their homes. Hearth fires glow. Somewhere, a group of neighbours shares a simple meal. Somewhere else, a sick child sleeps fitfully as a parent keeps watch. And you realise something important. Medieval London is not defined solely by its filth or its hardships. It is also defined by the quiet persistence of its people, their ability to endure discomfort, illness, danger, and uncertainty, and still rise each morning to work, trade, pray, care, and rebuild shape the city more than the mud or the sewage ever could. This resilience, humble and unspectacular, laid the foundation for the London that would one day become a global powerhouse, not through the actions of kings or nobles alone, but through the daily, repetitive efforts of ordinary people who survived a city that often seemed determined to swallow them whole. You stand at the northern edge of medieval Scotland, far beyond the familiar mainland fields, beyond the great clan territories, beyond even the rugged highlands where only the hardiest families survive. Here, at the very fringe of human habitation, lie the Shetland Islands, battered by wind, rain, salt, and solitude. This is a place where the North Sea and the Atlantic meet, colliding in endless, restless motion. A place where the sky feels larger than the land beneath your feet, and where the sea determines nearly every aspect of human life. Even before you see the crofters, you feel the raw intensity of this landscape. The wind arrives first, sweeping across the open ground in long, unbroken gusts. It rattles the heather, bends the coarse grass, and seems to search your clothing for any gap through which it can slip. The wind is constant, so constant that you quickly lose the sense of calm that still air can bring. In Shetland, you learn to measure your days by the strength of the wind rather than the warmth of the sun. The land itself is uneven, a mosaic of low hills, boggy patches, pools of rainwater, and stretches of exposed rock. Soil here is thin, easily waterlogged, and often salted by storms that carry ocean spray far inland. Crofters do not have the luxury of choosing fertile ground. Instead, they coax their living from whatever patches of earth are available. No matter how unforgiving, their farms, or crofts, are small and scattered, each one a fragile claim against the power of the sea. When you approach one such croft, you notice how modest its structures are. The main house is low to the ground, built of stacked stone held together by little more than gravity and careful placement. The roof is made of turf, thick mats of living grass, layered over wooden beams. This keeps the wind out more effectively than wooden shingles, and it provides insulation against the cold. But it also means the roof must be tended like a garden, trimmed and patched, so it does not become too heavy or allow rain to seep through. You step inside the crofter's home and immediately feel the dimness. There are no large windows. Too much glass would make the structure vulnerable, and too much open space would let the wind steal away precious heat. Instead, the interior is lit by the soft glow of a peat fire burning in the hearth. The smell of peat smoke is distinctive, earthy, slightly sweet, and a constant presence in every dwelling on these islands. Peat, cut from the bogs during the few dry days of summer, is the primary fuel available. Without it, winter becomes impossible to survive. The crofter and his family gather around this hearth, not for leisure, but for necessity. Heat is life, and the fire is the house's silent center. Around it, simple wooden stools and rough woolen blankets offer comfort. The floor is made of packed dirt. Tools hang from the walls. A small pot hangs over the fire, filled with a thin broth of barley, onions, and whatever fish or scraps the family could gather. Meat is reserved for special days or times of desperation. Hunger is not unusual. It is a familiar, lingering companion. Daily life for a crofter begins early, long before the grey sun rises above the horizon. Even in summer, the daylight can be fleeting. In winter, darkness dominates the weeks, broken only by the glow of hearth fires and the faint reflection of moonlight on the sea. The crofter steps outside to check his sheep, small, hardy creatures that have adapted to the harsh climate. Their wool is coarse but invaluable. Sheep must be watched carefully. Storms can scatter them, and cliffs are never far away. Losing even one animal can have serious consequences. As you follow the crofter across the uneven ground, you notice how he navigates the landscape with practiced ease. Every stone, every patch of heather, every hollowed place where water collects, he knows them. This familiarity is not romantic, it is survival. The land is both friend and adversary. It provides grazing for sheep, turf for fuel, and small plots where barley or oats might grow if tended carefully. But it also steals crops with frost, floods fields with sudden rains, and offers little protection from storms that sweep across the sea. Women in the household work tirelessly as well. Their duties include spinning wool, weaving cloth, tending small gardens, caring for children, preparing food, and managing the tasks that keep the croft functional. Wool work alone consumes countless hours. The family relies on what they can produce themselves, and even a small mistake in weaving or knitting can mean less warmth in winter. Thick woolen cloaks and felted shoes are not luxuries. They are barriers against illness and cold. Children contribute from an early age. A young boy might help gather peat. A young girl might assist with carding wool or collecting eggs from the hens. Childhood is short in Shetland. The family needs every pair of hands, and knowledge is passed down not through formal instruction, but through observation and repetition. The coastline, the weather, the land, each becomes a teacher. You watch as the crofter turns his gaze toward the sea. The water glitters in the weak light, rippling darkly under shifting grey clouds. Boats bob in the distance, small wooden vessels known as sixerns or yoels, designed to cut through waves, yet light enough to pull ashore quickly. Fishing is not merely an occupation here, it is a lifeline. Without fish, especially cod and herring, the islands cannot support their population. But fishing is dangerous work. The sea around Shetland is cold, unpredictable, and deep. Storms can appear within minutes. A single misjudgment can pull a boat under. The crofter's brother prepares a boat for an afternoon trip. He checks the oars, examines the nets, and inspects the hull for signs of wear. Fishing is often a communal activity. Men work in groups for safety and efficiency. Yet even with careful preparation, risk is constant. The North Sea has claimed countless lives. Over centuries, the sea's toll is etched into the memory of every family, shaping a culture defined by caution, respect, and a hint of fear. As the men push the boat into the surf, you notice how the women watch silently from the shore. They do not wave or call out. In Shetland, such displays feel out of place against the vastness of the sea. Instead, there is a quiet acknowledgement. The sea gives, the sea takes, and the best anyone can do is meet it with steady hands and steady hearts. You turn your attention to the croft itself, noticing the small garden fenced against the wind. Seaweed lines the edges of the plot, a valuable fertilizer gathered from the tide line after storms. Even with this help, crops remain small. Oats and barley struggle in poor soil. Kale and hardy root vegetables fare better, though they offer limited variety. The family supplements their diet with foraged foods, shellfish, berries in summer, and occasionally seabird eggs from cliffs, reachable only by experienced climbers. This way of life leaves little room for rest. Every season brings new demands. In spring, lambs must be protected from sudden cold snaps. In summer, peat is cut and dried. In autumn, grain is harvested and stored carefully to prevent spoilage. Winter becomes a slow, grinding wait, each day blending into the next as storms lash the land and the family clings to warmth and routine. Yet amid the hardship, you observe something remarkable. The Shetlanders do not see themselves as victims of their environment. Rather, they understand that the land and sea shape them as much as they shape the land and sea. Their sense of identity is bound to isolation, not as a burden, but as a defining element of who they are. Stories passed down through generations speak of ancestors who endured worse storms, harsher winters, and scarcer harvests. These stories offer comfort, a reminder that survival here is a tradition in its own right. Community bonds reinforce this resilience. Crofters rely on one another for shared labour, protection, and emotional support. A neighbour might help repair a turf roof after a storm. Another might lend grain during a lean season. Gifts are rarely recorded as debts. Instead, they weave a network of mutual obligation that strengthens the entire settlement. In such a remote place, isolation does not mean loneliness, it means interdependence. As night approaches, you feel the temperature drop sharply. The crofter and his family gather once more around the hearth. The fire glows softly, casting shadows on the stone walls. The children curl up under wool blankets. The adults speak in low voices, discussing the weather, the sheep, the fishing prospects for the coming days. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the roof with an almost living force. Listening, you begin to understand the emotional resilience required to live in such a place. Life here is not dramatic, nor does it offer many comforts. Instead, it demands patience, humility, and discipline. The crofters know that each day is shaped by forces far beyond their control: the wind, the sea, the soil, the seasons. And yet, rather than despairing, they adapt. Quietly, steadily, they adapt. Before you leave the croft for the night, you take one last look at the horizon. The sky is darkening, streaked with thin ribbons of pale light fading into the sea. It is a stark beauty, one that feels ancient and unchanging. You cannot help but wonder how medieval crofters found hope in such a place, how they balanced daily struggle with moments of peace, and how they maintained the strength to endure a life lived at the very edge of the world. You wake again in the soft quiet of the boglands, where nothing ever seems to hurry, and yet everything feels as if it is slowly decaying. In the first section, you stepped into the world of a small medieval peat-cutting village, an isolated settlement on the margins of more powerful towns, more fertile fields, and more desirable lands. Now, you begin to move deeper into the structure of daily life. Here, what the people did, what they feared, and what they silently endured. The bog has a way of shaping everything, including the pace of the villagers' work. You will notice that most of their tasks revolve not around growth, but around extraction. Nothing is planted or coaxed from the soil in the way it is in more fertile regions. Here, people cut, they hollow, they take away layers of the land, slice after slice, for fuel. The soil never offers generosity. It offers only material to burn. Daily labour, hour by hour. A typical day in the bog village begins before the sun emerges from mist. The villagers move slowly, but they move early. You can imagine the sound of wooden clogs on damp thresholds, the muffled talk of families already tired before the workday begins. The village has no real morning chorus of birds. Instead, there's the slurping sound of boots sinking into mud as people walk toward the peat pits. In many medieval communities, work followed the cycle of the seasons. Here, work followed the consistency of necessity. There was always more peat to cut, more drainage channels to maintain, more bundles to dry. Each person had a defined role. Men typically handled the slicing of the peat blocks, a job requiring strength, rhythm, and a tolerance for bitter weather. Women carried, stacked, and dried the peat, carefully arranging the blocks to avoid collapse or rot. Children gathered reeds or watched over small fires used for pre-drying. Occasionally, older villagers, those whose backs no longer allowed them to cut or stack, acted as watchers. They monitored the weather, checked tools for wear, warned of softness in the ground. Their main job was survival through observation. A small misjudgment, a poorly placed foot, could sink a person waist-deep in muck. Tools and techniques of a hard life. The peat spade, known in different muck regions as a slane or turf iron, was the most important tool in the village. You can picture its long wooden handle and metal blade, angled specifically to slice through compacted peat layers. Each villager guarded their peat spade with something close to reverence. It was not simply an instrument of labor. It was a direct line to warmth, cooking fuel, and trade goods. Cutting turf was not random. The villagers dug carefully, planned trenches, often a meter deep, sometimes deeper, depending on the quality of the peat. The digging required a specific posture, a practiced twist, and a steady balance. You find yourself observing the rhythm. Step into the trench, anchor the heel, push the spade down, twist, lift, slice the peat block, and hand it to the person behind you. The smell of the earth, the heaviness of the air, and the constant moisture made the work unglamorous at best and dangerous at worst. Drying peat was difficult and exacting. If stacked improperly, the blocks collapsed. If dried too slowly, they grew mold. If dried too quickly, often due to rare bouts of sun, the outsides hardened while the insides remained damp, causing problems when stored for winter. And winter, of course, was the true enemy. A poorly prepared village could freeze. Food and its persistent scarcity. You might assume that the village survived on fish from nearby marsh waters, wildfowl, or foraged herbs. And they did, but only barely. The boglands were not generous. Most edible plants grew in narrow margins near slightly drier ground. Fish were caught with woven traps, but the yields were often small. The real staple was barley, purchased or bartered from nearby farmers. Some villagers grew it on tiny plots of reclaimed land, but the soil rarely cooperated. In good years, the grain tasted nutty and rich. In bad years, it tasted of smoke, mold, or desperation. Salted fish, dried beans, and the occasional joint of pork were treated like treasure. The pigs themselves were fed whatever scraps families could spare. They were valuable not only for meat, but for manure used sparingly on the few plots that could be persuaded to grow food. On especially lean days, the villagers survived on broth made from whatever bones remained from earlier meals. They boiled them again and again, extracting every last trace of nourishment. The smell of thin broth was common, warm, familiar, and slightly disappointing. Shelter and the weight of weather, peat-built houses, looked sturdy from a distance, but felt fragile inside. Their walls, made from blocks of dried turf stacked in thick layers, were good insulators, but poor defenders against dampness. Inside, every surface felt a little soft, a little cold, a little alive. Mold grew on anything not near the fire. Wooden beams darkened from smoke and moisture. Floors remained uneven, covered in rush mats that had to be replaced often. A typical home had one main room, sometimes two. The hearth was always central, not only for warmth, but for drying clothes, curing fish, heating stones, and keeping insects at bay. The hearth also served as the psychological center of the house. Families gathered around it not for comfort, but because the alternative was dark, cold, and unpleasant. During autumn storms, the wind wailed across the bogs, making houses groan. You can imagine the feeling of lying awake at night, listening to the roof shake, unsure if it would hold. People slept fully clothed in winter. Blankets were heavy, woven from rough wool. Many of the villagers slept in shifts because someone needed to tend the fire at all times. If it died during the night, the cold would seep into the walls, and restarting the hearth became difficult. Health, illness, and a constant chill. One of the least dramatic but most burdensome aspects of living in the Boglands was the constant toll it took on human health. Respiratory issues were common. Chronic joint pain was almost universal. Children often developed coughs that never truly healed. The wet, cold ground seemed to work its way into the bones. Medical knowledge was scarce, and healers in bog communities relied on a mixture of observation, herbs, and superstition. Willow bark, bog myrtle, and angelica roots were used to treat fevers and pains. But these remedies offered only mild relief. In these villages, illness was not a dramatic event. It was a quiet, chronic companion, an expected part of life, tolerated because there was little else to do. You might meet a villager who had never known a day without back pain or a persistent cough. Suffering here was subtle, long-lasting, and endured with almost resigned patience. Social structure, quiet hierarchies. While the village appeared uniformly poor, a quiet social order existed. The peat cutter with the sharpest spade and the strongest rhythm held a kind of respect. The family with access to a slightly drier storage shed enjoyed privilege. The elder who knew how to read the weather, or predict the shifting bog, was listened to carefully. The village leader was not a noble, but more a coordinator, a person experienced enough to manage disputes, allocate work during peat cutting seasons, and negotiate with merchants from the outside. This role changed hands slowly, often kept within families known for reliability. You will notice, however, that despite these hierarchies, survival required cooperation. No household could cut enough peat alone. No family could maintain drainage channels without help. Neighbors depended on each other, not because they liked one another, but because isolation meant death. Contact with the outside world. Once or twice a year, traders visited the bog village. They arrived on narrow wooden carts, pulled by sturdy ponies, familiar with unstable roads. These traders brought items the village could not produce: iron tools, coarse cloth, salt, grains, and occasionally small luxuries such as beeswax candles. In exchange, the villagers offered peat, bundles of reeds, dried fish, or, in especially fortunate seasons, a piglet. The exchange was slow, cautious, almost ceremonial. The merchants never stayed long. They spoke of larger towns, bustling markets, and stone churches. Stories that fascinated the younger villagers, but reminded older ones of the distance between their world and the rest of medieval society. Whenever the traders left, the village felt even smaller than before. The silent dangers beneath the surface. Living on a bog was a study in subtle threats. The ground could shift overnight, creating invisible pockets of softness. A misstep could lead to a twisted ankle or a plunge into cold, sucking mud. Entire sections of ground occasionally collapsed due to water movement beneath the surface. Then there were fires, an unexpected hazard in a wet world. A peat fire could burn underground for weeks, traveling unseen. You could be walking over ground that seemed solid, only to find heat rising from beneath your feet. The villagers knew the signs: a faint warmth, a hollow sound when tapped with a stick, the faint smell of burnt earth. They were always listening, always watching, always cautious. A life built not on ambition, but endurance. The most striking aspect of this village is not its poverty or hardship, but its quiet constancy. People here did not dream of rising above their circumstances. They focused on maintaining what little they had. Ambition was replaced by persistence, hope by habit. You can imagine the conversations shared at night around the hearth. Simple talk about next season's peat stacks, the condition of boots, or the quality of last week's fish catch. These discussions may seem boring, but they were the threads that held the community together. The villagers did not expect comfort. They expected survival. and in that narrow space between struggle and endurance, they found a rhythm of life that lasted generations. But life in the boglands was slowly changing, whether the villagers recognized it or not. Weather patterns shifted, trade routes rerouted, larger political forces stirred beyond the marshes. You return to the Shetland Islands as the seasons press relentlessly onward. The winter wind howls across the cliffs, and the snow-laden clouds stretch endlessly above the patchwork of bogs, rocky outcrops, and tidal flats. By now, you understand the crofter's life in fragments, the cutting and stacking of peat, the tending of hardy sheep, the weaving of woolen clothing, the struggle for food and shelter. But now it is time to see how these small, daily efforts come together to define a lifetime. The crofter's year follows the rhythm of survival, not luxury. By the time autumn arrives, the family has spent months preparing for the long nights. Peat stacks are carefully layered near the hearth and in small sheds to protect them from damp and wind. The lambs have been shorn and secured, the grain harvested and stored. The seaweed, fertilizer already scattered in anticipation of the next growing season. Every step has been measured, every choice dictated by necessity. The preparation is never complete. Storms often arrive early, tearing through unprotected roofs or sweeping across fields, flattening crops. The sea may claim a boat, washing nets into the waves, or overturning a small sicksern before the fisherman can return to shore. A single accident can shift the balance between survival and hardship. Yet despite this uncertainty, families endure. Each preparation, no matter how humble, is a testament to resilience. Inside the turf house, the family huddles near the fire. Smoke curls lazily toward the low roof, and the warmth offers a fragile but vital comfort. The crofter's children, now more competent in their daily tasks, help carry peat from the stacks, grind barley into flour, or tend small fires for drying fish. Their education is not formal. It is hard-earned through practice and observation. By the Richinids, time they are 12 or 13, they understand the vagaries of the weather, the subtleties of the land, and the moods of the sea. You notice that this survival is as much mental as physical. The crofters rely on careful observation, planning, and routine. The mind is a tool as much as the spade or the loom. A lapse in attention can cost lives, missing a soft patch in the bog, underestimating a tidal shift, misjudging the wind while sailing. Over time, these families cultivate a quiet, steady awareness of the environment that becomes second nature. Health remains precarious. Winters bring fevers, respiratory issues, and malnutrition when the stores run low. Yet the crofters rarely despair. They employ herbal remedies, bog myrtle for inflammation, angelica for digestion, seaweed poultices for wounds. But they also rely on ingenuity. Clothing is layered, floors are insulated with rushes, peat fires burn steadily to ward off cold. Illness is managed with care, but more often it is endured. Life here teaches patience and measured effort. Community plays an equally important role in sustaining survival. While each croft is largely self-contained, families share resources when necessary. A neighbor might lend a few bundles of peat if a stove runs low, or assist in mending a storm-damaged roof. Knowledge is shared. Fishing spots, safe passages over boggy ground, signs of impending storms. This collective memory strengthens the village, making isolation manageable. Survival, in this context, is both individual and communal. Fishing continues to supplement the crofter's diet, but the sea is unforgiving. You can imagine the rhythm of a fishing trip. Hauling a small boat across shingle and rock, rowing into swells, casting nets, and returning with whatever bounty the sea allows. Each voyage carries risk, yet without it, families would face famine. You begin to understand why caution is a guiding principle. Every action is weighted by its potential consequences. Even leisure is constrained by necessity. There is no time for idleness, yet the crofters find small ways to maintain their spirits. Singing while working, storytelling in the evenings, and communal gatherings in brief moments of respite foster a sense of continuity and identity. These rituals, though simple, reinforce the bonds of kinship and community, and they provide mental sustenance in a landscape defined by challenge. As the year progresses, you see the subtle ways in which adaptation shapes daily life. Houses are repaired with materials readily available: stone, turf, driftwood. Clothing is layered and patched repeatedly. Tools are maintained, repaired, or improvised from what can be salvaged. Food is preserved through drying, salting, or fermentation. Every resource is maximized, every failure noted for future reference. Life in Shetland is a constant exercise in resourcefulness. You also begin to notice the quiet passage of time. Generations live and die with the same routines, each building upon the knowledge of their predecessors. Children grow, inherit tasks, and repeat the cycles of labor. Parents age, bodies slowing under the physical demands, but minds steady with experience. The continuity is remarkable. Life is repetitive, harsh, and slow, yet it persists. Winter brings the most acute tests. Storms batter the coastline, snow and ice make travel dangerous, and food reserves dwindle. Families huddle close to hearths for warmth, sharing stories and maintaining the rhythm of daily chores in diminished light. These months are long, measured not in hours, but in small tasks: tending fires, checking on animals, repairing tools, and rationing food. Survival is not guaranteed, yet they endure through careful planning, shared effort, and the steady execution of labor learned over a lifetime. The end of winter is met with cautious optimism. Streams thaw, peat dries enough for cutting, and early birds signal the gradual return of light and warmth. Families assess losses, repair damage, and begin the slow cycle again. Success is measured not by abundance but by survival. The animals remain alive, the children are healthy, the stores sufficient. In this context, a modest spring harvest or a productive fishing trip is cause for quiet celebration. As you observe the crofters, it becomes clear that their life is not about ambition or growth. It is about endurance. Every action, every task, every precaution is a testament to the ability to continue in an environment that offers no guarantees. Hardship is constant, but so is adaptation. The crofters' survival depends on foresight, cooperation, and an intimate understanding of a harsh and unyielding environment. When you finally leave the croft at the end of the day, you see the family settle near the hearth once more. The wind outside continues its relentless song. The sea crashes beyond the cliffs, and the bog stretches endlessly under the muted light. Yet, within these walls, the result to the muted light, family persists. They have weathered storms, disease, scarcity, and isolation. They will endure again, tomorrow, and the day after that. This endurance, though unremarkable to the outside world, is extraordinary in its own right. The crofters of Shetland survived where others might have abandoned the land. Their ingenuity, diligence, and communal bonds allowed a small population to maintain life in one of the most inhospitable corners of medieval Europe. Theirs was a quiet triumph, recorded only in the continuity of generations, the maintenance of hearths, and the careful stacking of peat against winter's fury. By the time you take your leave, it is clear that Shetland's crofters do not rely on dramatic heroism, luck, or conquest. They survive through repetition, skill, and an unflinching acceptance of hardship. Their story is a testament to the human capacity to endure the worst of natural circumstances, maintaining life and community in a world that offers very little assistance. And so, the definitive truth emerges. The crofters' lives were shaped not by the sea or the wind alone, but by the quiet, unceasing work of ordinary people committed to survival. In the end, history remembers few of them by name, but their perseverance ensured that life in Shetland continued, season after season, century after century. you descend into the world of medieval salt mining, a place of darkness, labour, and quiet desperation. Unlike the crofters of Shetland or the mud-soaked streets of London, salt miners live beneath the earth, far from sun and sky. Here, survival is measured not in seasons or tides, but in the passage of air through narrow tunnels and the weight of salt-laden rocks carried to the surface. The work is unglamorous, repetitive, and perilous. And yet, for centuries, it sustains towns, trade, and even the political power of kings. Salt, in medieval Europe, is far more than a seasoning. It preserves food, particularly meat and fish, allowing societies to store provisions through long winters and transport them across great distances. It flavors, yes, but more importantly, it prevents decay, staves off famine, and fuels economies. This makes it an indispensable resource. To secure it, communities establish mines, brine pools, and salt pans. Among these, underground mining is the most labor-intensive and dangerous. Imagine stepping into a mine. The air is heavy, cool, and damp, carrying a faint chemical tang of mineral-rich water seeping through rock. Shafts descend sharply, sometimes following veins of rock salt, sometimes dug wherever deposits are shallow enough to exploit. The light of the surface quickly disappears. Torches, or rushlights, provide minimal illumination, flickering across jagged walls and rough-hewn tunnels. Every movement is cautious. A misstep could lead to broken bones, crushed toes, or worse. The miners themselves are varied in skill and status. Some are highly trained, almost like artisans, understanding the veins of salt and the structure of tunnels. Others are young apprentices, barely more than children, taught to wield a pick or a hammer under strict supervision. Each miner is essential. A single inexperienced hand can trigger cave-ins, waste precious rock, or disrupt the delicate balance of supports holding tunnels upright. You follow one miner through a twisting corridor. His boots sink slightly into the damp floor. His shoulders strain against the pick slung over his back. The walls glint faintly with salt crystals. He pauses, tapping the rock with his hammer. A dull echo confirms its solidity. Then he swings again, chipping away at a block, which another miner will carry on a small sled toward a lift shaft. The repetition is hypnotic. Strike, lift, slide, descend, repeat. Working conditions are harsh. Air is often thin, laden with dust and salt particles. The light is dim, almost oppressive. The tunnels are cold, their stone surfaces dripping with water that runs into boots and soaks clothing. Noise is constant. Picks strike rock. Sleds scrape the floor. Distant shouts travel along corridors. Over time, the combination of physical exertion, poor ventilation, and dust can affect miners' lungs, joints, and eyesight. Life expectancy here is lower than above ground, but the pay, or more precisely, the access to food and social survival, keeps people coming. Food itself is meager. Miners rely on salted provisions brought from the surface: salted pork, dried fish, coarse bread, and occasionally grains boiled into thin porridge. Meals are eaten quickly, often standing or seated on stone blocks, leaving hands sticky with salt. There is no luxury of heat. The work itself is what generates warmth. The miners sweat through layers of wool, only to be chilled immediately by the cold, damp air after a break. Every day is an exercise in endurance. Beyond the physical labor, there is danger at every turn. Cavities may flood after rain seeps through, rock above. Gas pockets, often undetectable until too late, can suffocate a miner. Roofs occasionally collapse. Each shaft is a narrow, unstable ecosystem that requires constant monitoring. Even experienced miners carry awareness of death with them, an unspoken companion, as constant as the sound of stone striking stone. Yet, despite the hardships, miners take pride in their skill. Each block extracted is carefully measured, checked for purity, and logged. Families depend on this labor for income, Merchants rely on it for trade, and entire towns grow prosperous on the salt mined from these veins. Salt itself carries immense social and economic weight. Prices are high, taxes are levied, and control of a mine can elevate a lord or monarch's influence. In this sense, the miner's work has far-reaching consequences, even if they rarely reap the political or financial rewards. Work in the mine follows a strict rhythm. Day begins with preparation. Tools are inspected, paths cleared, lights checked. Then the miners descend into the tunnels. Some focus on extraction, others on transporting blocks, and others maintain supports and ventilation. Teams rotate tasks, each aware that their survival depends on the precision of every action. A moment's carelessness could endanger the entire group. Evenings are brief and functional. Miners return to small dwellings above ground, often clustered near the mine entrance. The houses are modest, stone foundations, thatched roofs, minimal furniture. Families prepare the next day's meals and repair clothing or tools. Children play cautiously in the vicinity of the mine, sometimes assisting with small tasks. Sleep is essential but often disturbed by the aches, strains, and persistent worry of the workday. Life is tightly regimented around the mine's demands. In winter, conditions above ground add additional pressure. Heavy snow and ice slow transport. Roads become nearly impassable. The threat of roof collapses increases as water from melting snow seeps into shafts. Miners must adapt, combining experience with careful observation, anticipating hazards that might not yet be visible. Survival is a constant negotiation between knowledge, skill, and the unpredictable elements. Despite the monotony of striking rock and hauling slabs, the miners develop coping mechanisms. Conversation is minimal but purposeful. Humor surfaces occasionally, a sharp relief against exhaustion. Rituals and songs help mark time and coordinate labor, reducing the sense of isolation in the oppressive darkness. Within these narrow tunnels, camaraderie is essential. If one person falters, others must adjust immediately to prevent disaster. Above ground, the broader society interacts indirectly with the miners. Salt merchants regulate distribution, towns collect taxes, and local lords oversee operations. These authorities rarely descend into the mines themselves, but they influence schedules, wages, and priorities. In essence, the miner's labor is both intimately connected to daily survival and inexorably tied to the wider economic and political network of medieval Europe. Yet, the miners' lives are not entirely bleak. Salt, for all its hardships in extraction, enables sustenance and trade, giving communities the capacity to store food, travel, and even thrive in regions otherwise incapable of supporting dense populations. The miners' repetitive, back-breaking work becomes the foundation for stability in towns, for merchants to prosper, and for armies to be fed. The salt they extract may reach distant markets, preserving fish in Brittany or meat in northern Germany, indirectly shaping regions far removed from the underground tunnels. As you imagine the day drawing to a close, the miners ascend the last shafts, their shoulders sore, hands raw, clothes crusted with salt. The surface air strikes them sharply. The sun, if visible at all, is low and pale, casting long shadows across the cold earth. They move silently toward their homes, where hearth fires glow faintly and families wait. The night promises little rest, but it brings the security of a short reprieve, and the knowledge that tomorrow they will return to the darkness, pick in hand, carving survival from rock. And as you leave the mine behind for a moment, you notice the unspoken truth. Life, for these medieval salt miners, is relentless, repetitive, and dangerous, yet it is also indispensable. Their quiet labor sustains countless others. Without them, the world above would be unable to preserve food, maintain trade, or survive harsh winters. History's trajectory, often measured in the deeds of kings or battles, rests in part on their unnoticed endurance. you return to the subterranean world of the medieval salt mine, where light is scarce, air moves reluctantly through narrow tunnels, and every breath carries fine dust and mineral residue. In Section 1, you observed the daily grind, the physical exertion, and the quiet significance of the miner's labor. Now, you begin to understand the subtler forces shaping life underground, the social structures, the rhythms of the seasons, and the cumulative toll on mind and body that makes this existence both ordinary and extraordinary. Work below the surface. Rituals of survival. Every morning begins with preparation, not only for the physical demands of mining, but also for the psychological challenge of entering darkness that can feel limitless. The miners light rush torches, checking each carefully so it will burn reliably through the hours. They inspect ladders and pulleys, reinforcing weak points that could fail under the weight of rock or man. Every task is repeated meticulously, for even minor mistakes can cascade into disaster. In the tunnels themselves, the work follows a strict rhythm. One miner strikes a block of salt with a pick, chipping it free from the rock face. Another slides it onto a sled, which is dragged along smooth stone tracks toward the lift shaft. Meanwhile, a third monitors air quality, listening for subtle shifts that indicate stagnant pockets of gas or a ceiling at risk of collapse. Each movement depends on the others. Teamwork is not optional, it is a requirement for life itself. Miners often work in shifts, rotating tasks to preserve energy and maintain vigilance. The longest stretches underground may last 8 hours or more. But the sense of time is distorted by dim light and repetitive labor. A single strike of pick against salt, repeated hundreds of times, can feel endless. Yet these repetitions are vital, the building blocks of survival and commerce, physical costs and endurance. The physical strain of mining is relentless. Backs curve under the effort of lifting salt blocks. Shoulders ache from swings of the pick. Hands blister, joints swell, and lungs fill with dust. Over time, miners develop a stooped posture, a weariness in every movement. Diseases such as silicosis, caused by prolonged inhalation of mineral dust, begin to appear. Miners cough, sometimes with blood-tinged sputum, yet continue working because rest is a luxury they cannot afford. Injuries are common. A falling block of salt can crush toes. A misstep on wet stone can fracture a wrist. Even minor cuts become dangerous in the damp, unhygienic conditions underground. Healing is slow, and medical care is primitive. Apprentices learn from the experienced miners to improvise bandages, clean wounds with boiled water, and protect injuries with layers of cloth. Each day is a balance between maintaining productivity and avoiding harm, a delicate negotiation with the body's limitations. Social hierarchies and cooperation. Though the work is physically egalitarian, everyone contributes to extraction, transportation, and maintenance. There exists a subtle hierarchy among miners. The most experienced, those who can read the veins of salt and anticipate structural weaknesses, are implicitly respected. Apprentices look to these veterans for guidance, and the success of the group often depends on their judgment. Similarly, foremen or overseers coordinate tasks, mediate disputes, and liaise with merchants or town officials above ground. Though they do not wield political power in the wider world, they hold authority in the mine, and their decisions can determine life or death. Despite the hierarchy, cooperation is constant. The labor is too dangerous and complex for solo effort. Miners communicate with precise, often unspoken signals. A tap of the pick, a call echoing through the tunnel, a hand gesture. These signals maintain rhythm, ensure safety, and build trust in a profession where error can be catastrophic. In this environment, reliance on one another is inseparable from survival. Life above ground and community ties above ground. The miner's existence is just as structured. Families cluster near the mine entrance in small, stone-built cottages. Children may help with carrying small loads, mending tools, or tending vegetable plots. Women maintain fires, prepare food, repair clothing, and manage supplies. This household labor is not peripheral, it sustains the underground workers, ensuring they can endure long, physically taxing shifts. The rhythm of above-ground life mirrors that below: preparation, labor, maintenance, and rest, repeated day after day. The village community extends beyond individual households. Food, clothing, and tools are often shared or bartered. Social bonds provide the safety net essential to survival. If a miner falls ill or is injured, neighbors step in. Similarly, trade and transportation are coordinated collectively. Salt extracted from the mine is not only a commodity, it is the lifeblood of the surrounding settlement, connecting families, merchants, and local authorities in a delicate web of interdependence. Economic pressures and broader context. Salt is valuable. Its production carries economic weight. Towns depend on it to preserve meat and fish. Markets demand it. Kings tax it. This means that miners' labor has significance far beyond the walls of the tunnels. Each block of salt represents weeks of effort and risk, yet also sustains trade networks, armies, and political power. The miners themselves rarely see the profits of this labor. Their survival is exchangeable currency. Salt for food, salt for shelter, salt for continuation. The disparity between effort and reward is a quiet, ever-present tension. Seasonal cycles dictate both opportunity and risk. Winter brings cold and damp that slow extraction and increase hazards of roof collapses. Heavy rains may flood shafts. Summer, though safer, brings increased demand from merchants eager to transport salt to distant markets. Mining schedules are adjusted accordingly, emphasizing productivity while respecting the physical limits of workers. Even in the absence of modern safety standards, a system of timing, observation, and adaptation emerges, an informal form of risk management born of necessity, psychological toll and adaptation. Working in darkness, separated from the natural cycles of sun and sky, exacts a psychological cost. Miners often experience fatigue, disorientation, or a dull numbness from repetition and confinement. Isolation, even within a group, is intense. Over time, miners develop strategies to maintain focus and morale. Songs, chants, simple rituals marking the beginning or end of shifts. Storytelling to pass time. Humor surfaces, sometimes dark and ironic, offering relief from monotony and stress. These coping mechanisms are small but vital, as mental resilience is as important as physical endurance. Stories pass through generations. Cautionary tales of collapses, heroic rescues, and the occasional miraculous survival. Apprentices memorize these accounts, internalizing lessons on safety, patience, and judgment. Knowledge is preserved, not in books, but in practice, conversation, and the tacit memory of those who navigate the tunnels daily. In this way, culture develops alongside labor, a quiet, practical form of wisdom. Illness, fatigue, and mortality disease is subtle but present. The damp, dusty air encourages respiratory infections, joint pain, and skin ailments. Nutrition is basic. Salt-heavy diets, combined with limited fresh vegetables, create chronic deficiencies. Exhaustion accumulates over years, slowly eroding physical capability. Life expectancy is reduced, yet resilience emerges through experience, careful pacing, and mutual support. Illness is rarely sudden and catastrophic. It is slow, chronic, and managed with ingenuity and perseverance. The quiet importance of the work. Despite the monotony, danger, and hardship, the miners' labor underpins the survival of larger society. Their work preserves food, sustains trade, and indirectly supports armies, merchants, and towns. Without salt, storage is impossible, diets are limited, and famine becomes more likely. These men and women, largely forgotten in chronicles, are in fact pillars of medieval existence. Their perseverance is both unnoticed and indispensable, a form of labor that connects life underground to life across the continent. By the end of a shift, miners emerge from the tunnels, coated in white dust, weary but alive. Their families wait, meals prepared, fires glowing. There is relief, but not triumph. The work will begin again tomorrow. Yet even in this repetitive cycle, there is satisfaction, survival, skill, and the quiet knowledge that their labor matters, even if history rarely remembers them individually. And as you step back to the edge of the mine entrance, you cannot help but ponder the hidden cost of preservation, the wear on bodies, the erosion of youth, the slow accumulation of exhaustion. History may recognize kings, battles, and treaties, but here in the tunnels, ordinary people quietly shape the survival of their society. The mine waits for no one. Day after day, year after year, men and women descend into its shadowed tunnels. Pick in hand, lungs full of dust, backs bent by the weight of salt. Life underground is relentless. A cycle without drama, but with stakes as high as any battlefield. One misstep, one misjudgment, one weak ceiling can end a life instantly. Yet the miners endure. They endure because their world depends on the white crystals they extract, because their families and communities rely on the preservation of food, because survival leaves little alternative. The culmination of their labor is quiet and cumulative. There is no trumpet fanfare when a mine is productive. There is no grand ceremony marking the extraction of another 100 tons of salt. Instead, achievement is measured in inches of progress, in stacks of salt, neatly prepared for transport, in lives sustained above ground, through food that will not spoil. Every block carries with it a hidden story of sweat, muscle, and patience. You watch the miners at work during a long winter, when the cold above ground sharpens the need for their product. They move rhythmically, carving veins of rock, hauling blocks, sliding sleds along stone tracks. Their breath clouds the dim tunnel air. Hands blister, eyes strain. Even the most experienced among them cannot fully escape fatigue, the slow erosion of strength that decades of labor produce. Yet they persist, each small movement reinforcing the larger framework of society. Families above ground adjust around the miners' schedule. Children fetch tools, gather firewood, or run errands for those entering the mine. Women repair clothing, prepare meals, and tend stores of preserved food. They act as invisible pillars, supporting the underground labor with their diligence and foresight. It is a delicate balance, each household a microcosm of interdependence, mirroring the broader societal reliance on this unseen work. The toll on the body is profound. Arthritis, joint pain, respiratory ailments, and eye strain are commonplace. Accidents are not rare. Over time, bodies harden and stoop. Movements once precise grow sluggish. Stamina diminishes. The miners accept these changes quietly. There is no room for complaints, only adaptation. They learn to pace themselves, conserve energy, and rely on collective vigilance to prevent fatal mistakes. Survival is not glamorous, but it is persistent. In the broader economic context, the miner's labor is simultaneously critical and undervalued. Salt enables towns to store meat for winter, preserve fish for trade, and sustain armies during campaigns. Merchants profit from transportation, while town authorities collect taxes. Kings benefit from commerce and revenue. Yet the miners themselves gain little prestige. They are anonymous pillars of survival, their toil absorbed into the broader machinery of medieval life. Recognition is rare. Respect is practical, rather than celebratory. Despite this, their work shapes history indirectly. Wars may be supplied, trade routes established, towns sustained, all because salt is available in sufficient quantities. Without it, communities face famine, armies cannot march, and societies falter. Miners, unseen, enable civilization to function. Their endurance is invisible yet indispensable, a quiet form of historical influence. Psychologically, mining exacts a subtle toll. Darkness can seem unending. Repetition, numbing, fatigue and monotony press against the mind, threatening distraction or despair. Miners develop coping mechanisms. Songs to synchronize labor, stories to pass time, humor to lighten the constant tension. Generations cultivate an understanding of risk, timing, and environmental awareness that allows them to survive. In this, knowledge and tradition are as essential as muscle and endurance. Seasonal changes provide some relief and challenge. Summer months ease cold-related hazards and allow for easier transport, yet also bring increased demand and pressure to maintain output. Winter amplifies danger. Ice, damp, and limited visibility heighten the risk of collapse and injury. Miners adjust continuously, observing subtle signs in the rock, air, and humidity that signal safety or danger. These adjustments, honed over years, are the invisible expertise that ensures survival. At the end of a day, miners emerge from the tunnels coated in salt dust, weary but alive. Families greet them with meals prepared from the very substance they extract. Firelight offers warmth and reassurance. Sleep is brief but essential, followed by another day of underground labor. Life in the mine is cyclical, disciplined, and exacting. Yet within this monotony lies the quiet satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. Each strike of the pick sustains life beyond the tunnel walls. You notice that survival here is not accidental. It is deliberate, methodical, and interdependent. Miners rely on each other's vigilance. Families rely on their labor. Towns rely on the availability of salt. Societies rely on the miner's ability to endure. The work may seem mundane, repetitive, even boring, but it is precisely in this repetition that civilization is maintained. Over decades, the cumulative effect is profound. Generations of miners work in the same shafts, develop the same expertise, and adapt to the same dangers. Their labor, largely invisible, underpins trade, sustains towns, and allows societies to grow. When historians note the expansion of markets, the success of towns, or the sustenance of armies, the silent contribution of salt miners is rarely mentioned. Yet, it is foundational. History, in this sense, is built not only on battles or decrees, but on the steady hands and enduring labor of ordinary people. Eventually, old miners retire, their bodies worn, hands gnarled, lungs fatigued. Apprentices become experienced, inheriting the knowledge and rhythm of the tunnels. The cycle continues. Generation after generation, an unbroken chain of labor connecting past to present. The mine remains, unchanged in purpose, if not in form, a testament to persistence, adaptation, and the quiet dignity of work. In the end, the story of medieval salt miners is not one of dramatic heroism or conspicuous wealth. It is a story of endurance, skill, and survival, a demonstration of how ordinary people maintain society through unglamorous but indispensable work. Their legacy is not recorded in monuments or chronicles, but in the continued function of communities, the preservation of food, and the stability of life above ground. Every block of salt carries this history silently, crystalline, and enduring. And so, the final truth emerges. The medieval salt miners lived lives that demanded resilience, cooperation, and careful attention to detail. They shaped the survival of society, yet history remembers them only as shadows behind their work. In the darkness, beneath the earth, they carved a world that others depended upon, leaving a legacy measured not in glory, but in the quiet continuation of life itself. Imagine a settlement fenced with high walls, separated from the surrounding village by a broad ditch or a thick hedge. Beyond these boundaries lies a world that will no longer touch the lives of the people inside. You are now stepping into a medieval leper colony, sometimes called a leprosarium, where those afflicted with leprosy known at the time as the disease of separation, live, labor, and die largely apart from mainstream society. Life here is constrained, repetitive, and marked by a quiet endurance that few outside would recognize. Leprosy in medieval Europe was feared, misunderstood, and associated with sin, moral failure, or divine punishment. Medical knowledge was rudimentary. Some believed it to be hereditary, others contagious through touch or proximity. There was no effective cure, and the afflicted were often exiled from their villages, both to protect the community and to enforce societal norms. The leper colony, then, was both a medical response and a social mechanism, a place for containment, isolation, and, paradoxically, survival. Upon entering the colony, the first thing you notice is the silence. It is not the absence of sound, but a subdued, controlled quiet. People speak in hushed tones, walk slowly, and conduct daily tasks carefully, as though the act of living itself requires caution. The settlement is small, usually clustered near a source of water for hygiene and agriculture, but isolated enough to prevent casual contact with the outside world. Houses are modest, often single-room dwellings built from timber, wattle, and daub, with thatched roofs that must be maintained constantly against wind and rain. Daily life revolves around survival and routine. Work is limited to what bodies can endure. Many lepers perform light labor, tending small gardens, weaving cloth, baking bread, or caring for poultry. Heavy agricultural work is often impossible, as the disease slowly erodes muscle, strength, sensation, and coordination. Yet productivity is expected, not only to sustain the colony, but to provide a sense of purpose and dignity. Idleness is discouraged, partly to occupy the mind and partly to maintain order. Food in the colony is basic but functional. Most diets consist of coarse bread, vegetables grown on site, occasional fish or meat, and porridge. Supplies from surrounding villages are limited, delivered at intervals, and often rationed strictly. Malnutrition is a constant threat, exacerbated by the disease itself, which can affect appetite, digestion, and the body's ability to absorb nutrients. Meals are prepared communally in small, stone-built ovens or hearths, with care to avoid spreading disease or contaminating shared spaces. Hygiene is a critical concern, both for health and social regulation. Lepers are expected to wash regularly, scrub floors, and maintain the interior and exterior of their homes. Water, however, is limited, and soap is scarce. Diseases other than leprosy, respiratory infections, intestinal parasites, and skin ailments spread easily in such conditions. The colony is a place of both confinement and vulnerability, where survival depends on vigilance, cleanliness, and cooperation. You notice that the walls of the colony are more than physical barriers. They mark a psychological separation from the outside world. Residents wear distinctive clothing, often marked with crosses or other symbols, to indicate their status. Bells or clappers may be carried to announce presence when moving outside designated areas. These markers are both protective and stigmatizing, enforcing the social distance deemed necessary by society. The effect is profound. Life within the colony is not only physically constrained, but socially defined, each gesture and step measured against both health and decorum. Medical treatment is rudimentary. Monks, priests, or appointed healers may provide herbal remedies, ointments, guidance. Herbs such as rosemary, sage, and garlic are common, applied to slow lesions or ease discomfort. Prayers and blessings are equally integral, reflecting the medieval belief that spiritual care was as important as physical care. Yet remedies rarely halt progression, and deterioration is often gradual but relentless. The body becomes a map of disease, with hands, feet, and face showing the earliest and most visible signs. Despite the physical decline, life continues within social structures. Leadership in the colony often rests with senior residents or appointed officials. sometimes clergy, who coordinate work, distribute food, and maintain order. Decisions are made collectively when possible, as the community's stability depends on cooperation and predictability. Children, when present, are rare and often integrated into family units or apprenticeships to maintain skills and education. Social bonds, though limited by disease, are crucial to psychological resilience. Religious practice forms the backbone of daily rhythm. Prayer, mass, and ritual observance provide structure and solace. For many residents, the spiritual aspect of life offers a sense of purpose when the body weakens. Monks or chaplains visiting from nearby abbeys may deliver sacraments, conduct confessions, or read scripture aloud. These rituals maintain morale, reinforce community norms, and remind residents that their lives still hold meaning, even in isolation. Boredom and monotony dominate much of life. Hours are spent performing repetitive tasks, sweeping floors, tending gardens, weaving baskets, or tending animals. There is little variation from day to day, yet each task carries importance. Routine sustains health, ensures productivity, and enforces the discipline necessary for communal living. Even small deviations can disrupt morale, leading to disputes or inefficiency. Life in the colony is an exercise in patient repetition, where survival is embedded in the quiet accumulation of effort. The psychological impact of separation is subtle but pervasive. Residents watch the outside world from behind walls, imagining celebrations, harvests, and travel they will never experience. News arrives only intermittently, through messengers or sympathetic neighbors, reinforcing both connection and exclusion. The colony becomes a universe in miniature, self-contained, yet always defined by its boundaries. Loneliness is mitigated through work, prayer, and interaction within the community, yet it remains a persistent shadow. At night, the colony is still. The flicker of candlelight illuminates modest interiors, and the faint murmur of prayer rises from simple chapels. Exhaustion is constant, yet there is a rhythm in this repetition, a pattern that sustains life when disease erodes comfort and freedom. The sick, the elderly, and the strongest alike find solace in routine. Survival becomes a measure not only of physical endurance, but of mental discipline. And, yet, despite careful management and the presence of community, uncertainty looms. Outbreaks of disease beyond leprosy, shortages of food or firewood, and sudden accidents pose constant threats. The residents navigate these hazards quietly, relying on experience, observation, and the strict routines of their world. Life is constrained, repetitive, and fragile, but it endures. As the day draws to a close, you pause to consider the lives of these residents. Each person is engaged in a slow negotiation with their own body, the environment, and society itself. Their survival is never guaranteed, yet it is tenacious. Daily tasks, repeated endlessly, are imbued with both practical necessity and quiet heroism. The leper colony, though hidden and often forgotten, becomes a testament to the human capacity for adaptation and endurance in the face of relentless challenge. You return to the colony as the days stretch on, one blending quietly into the next. The rhythm of life has already begun to feel both confining and comforting. Here, repetition is survival, sweeping the paths, tending the gardens, repairing roofs, feeding the few animals that survive. Each act, however mundane, carries weight. Every stroke of effort secures another day of life in a world that offers few guarantees. The residents have adapted in countless subtle ways. Clothing is layered to preserve warmth, patched repeatedly with whatever fabric can be salvaged. Wool is spun, dyed with local plants, and woven into durable garments. Even the smallest details, tucking cloth over lesions, wrapping fragile limbs, padding feet against frostbite, reflect careful attention to the body's vulnerabilities. Survival is not heroic. It is meticulous, unglamorous, and precise. Food remains a constant challenge. Gardens produce limited yields. hardy vegetables like cabbage, carrots, and onions. Poultry and goats supplement diets. Some colonies manage small fisheries if near a river or pond. Stored grains are carefully rationed, measured to sustain the population until the next delivery from the outside. Residents develop an intimate understanding of nutrition, not through science, but necessity. The slightest miscalculation could mean hunger or weakened immunity. Cooking is methodical. Porridge is boiled just long enough to reduce contamination risk. Bread is baked in small, carefully tended ovens, and meat or fish is salted to preserve it. Every meal is both nourishment and survival strategy. Water is another critical resource. Wells are dug and maintained, streams diverted, rainwater collected. Hygiene routines are designed not just for comfort, but to reduce disease spread. Bathing is infrequent but deliberate. Cloths are reused sparingly, washed only when necessary. Residents are acutely aware of the balance between cleanliness and preservation of scarce resources. Even minor lapses can lead to infection, which can be fatal in a community already weakened by disease. The social structure within the colony is as important as physical survival. Leadership falls to elders or appointed overseers, sometimes from the clergy. These individuals coordinate work, enforce rules, and mediate disputes. Obedience is not born of fear alone. It is practical. The colony cannot function without order. Disagreements over food, chores, or responsibilities are rare but carry significance, as disruptions can ripple through the fragile social ecosystem. Children, if present, are rare and carefully integrated. They observe and participate in light labor, fetching water, tending small plots, or assisting with weaving and sewing. Education is informal, consisting of observation, instruction from parents or elders, and the slow accumulation of skills necessary for daily life. These lessons are practical rather than intellectual, yet they are vital. A child learns to recognize edible plants, anticipate water shortages, and perform tasks that will become crucial for long-term survival. Religion remains central, shaping both routine and morale. Daily prayers, mass, and occasional visits from chaplains reinforce purpose and community cohesion. Spiritual practice provides structure in an otherwise constrained world and offers comfort in moments of fear, illness, or despair. Ritual becomes as practical as it is symbolic. Prayer offers a framework for patience, discipline, and acceptance of limitations. Many residents believe that spiritual endurance is inseparable from physical survival. Yet despite the structure, monotony, and care, uncertainty is constant. Illness beyond leprosy can sweep through a colony, weakening bodies already compromised by disease and limited nutrition. Winters are particularly perilous. Frozen ground makes gardening impossible. Fires consume scarce fuel, and isolation can stretch weeks or months without outside contact. Even minor accidents, falls, burns, or cuts can be deadly. The residents adapt constantly, using knowledge passed from elder generations, improvising with materials at hand, and observing patterns in weather, health, and resources. Psychological resilience is as crucial as physical adaptation. Isolation from society is profound. Residents watch distant celebrations, markets, and festivals through the walls, reminded of lives they can no longer touch. Letters or messages from the outside arrive infrequently, yet they sustain hope and connection. To cope, residents develop routines, rituals, and communal activities. They sing, tell stories, and maintain traditions that reinforce community identity. Humor and small pleasures, tidying a garden, baking bread, observing the weather, offer subtle relief from the constraints of confinement. The passage of time in the colony is both cyclical and relentless. Seasons dictate work. Planting, harvesting, maintenance, and preparation for winter. Deaths are frequent, yet life continues. Families are fractured, but persistent. Knowledge is passed quietly from tessus, parent to child, from elder to apprentice. Every action is designed to ensure continuity, even when hope seems tenuous. The colony functions not through grandeur or external recognition, but through the disciplined, repetitive labor of its residents. Illness imposes additional demands. Lepers experience progressive physical deterioration, loss of sensation, deformities, pain, and fatigue. Residents adapt carefully, using mobility aids, modifying tools, and arranging living spaces to accommodate weakness. Pain is constant, yet it is managed through routine, herbal remedies, prayer, and community support. Life is measured not by comfort, but by endurance, each day negotiated carefully against the body's limits. Community cohesion is vital. Cooperation extends to every aspect of life. Collective gardening, shared cooking, maintenance of infrastructure, and mutual care for the sick. Trust is essential. A lapse in attention, mismanaged food, neglect of hygiene, or a failure to coordinate labor can imperil everyone. In this sense, survival is collective. No individual endures alone. The colony thrives not because of abundant resources, but because its inhabitants cultivate reliability, skill, and mutual responsibility. Despite the hardships, the leper colony develops a quiet internal culture. Songs, stories, religious observances, and traditions create continuity across generations. Residents may have little contact with the outside world, yet they maintain a sense of identity and purpose. Survival is as much about maintaining dignity and routine as it is about food, health, or shelter. Each action, however small, reinforces both life and the cohesion of the community. As the day ends and twilight falls over the walled settlement, you see the residents engaged in their final tasks, tending fires, checking water, preparing meals, and offering prayers. Exhaustion is evident, yet there is a quiet steadiness. Each person moves deliberately, aware that every action contributes to collective survival. The monotony is profound, yet it is also sustaining. Life in the colony is defined by its routines, its constraints, and its reliance on communal knowledge and perseverance. The leper colony endures, season after season, year after year. Within its high walls, lives continue in repetition. Sweeping paths, tending gardens, preparing food, tending fires, and offering prayers. Every task is a negotiation with circumstance. Every day, a small triumph of adaptation. Here, survival is not measured in wealth, prestige, or power. It is measured by the continuity of life itself. You watch as winter settles across the settlement. Snow drifts against the walls. Cold winds whip through gaps in thatch and themba, and water sources freeze. The residents adapt quietly. Extra layers of clothing, carefully rationed fuel, and small modifications to daily routines ensure that even the frailest survive. Life is harsh, yet predictable. The rhythm of survival continues, guided by knowledge accumulated over decades, sometimes centuries. The physical toll of disease is ever present. Lepers experience progressive deterioration, numbness, sores, deformities, and persistent pain. Even the most resilient bodies weaken under the combined strain of illness, labor, and environmental hardship. Yet, remarkably, the residents endure. Their adaptations, modified tools, careful pacing of work, strategic use of space allow them to continue daily tasks long after outsiders might assume their capacity is gone. Endurance is embedded in the routines of daily life. Community cohesion remains central. The colony functions because trust, cooperation, and mutual responsibility are constant. Residents support one another in labor, care for the ill, and preserve knowledge critical for survival. Leadership, whether through elders, appointed officials, or clergy, ensures continuity, fairness, and the efficient distribution of resources. Even small actions, a shared meal, a repaired roof, or assistance with a task, carry enormous significance, reinforcing bonds and sustaining life. Children, though rare, carry forward knowledge, skills, and tradition. Apprenticeships teach gardening, cooking, weaving, and religious observance. Observation and repetition become the curriculum, ensuring that the next generation can continue life within the colony. Even in isolation, continuity is maintained, a quiet, uncelebrated triumph over the limitations imposed by disease and circumstance. Religion remains an anchor. Daily prayers, ritual observances, and occasional visits from chaplains provide rhythm, structure, and solace. Spiritual practice offers a sense of purpose and community cohesion. In a world where the body deteriorates slowly and unpredictably, the mind finds stability in ritual. Faith is both practical and symbolic, shaping endurance as much as it shapes identity. Food continues to shape life. Gardens, poultry, and small-scale farming. Farming resented, provide sustenance, while supplies from outside are rationed meticulously. Residents understand the fine balance required to prevent hunger or scarcity. Cooking, tending, and rationing are not merely tasks, they are acts of survival. Each meal is a negotiation between resources and necessity, reflecting both human ingenuity and the fragility of life within the colony. Health challenges remain ever present. Epidemics of disease, accidents, and malnutrition are constant threats. Yet residents have developed informal medical knowledge, using herbs, careful cleaning, and improvisation to manage symptoms. Even when treatment cannot halt progression, practical care mitigates suffering and extends life. Knowledge is shared orally, through demonstration, and through careful observation, ensuring that survival strategies endure across generations. Isolation imposes a profound psychological burden. Residents are separated from broader society, observing festivals, markets, and celebrations only from afar. Letters or occasional visitors provide faint connection, but the majority of life unfolds within the colony's walls. Coping mechanisms emerge: storytelling, songs, humor, and shared labor. Even in darkness and monotony, mental resilience develops alongside physical adaptation. Emotional survival is inseparable from practical survival. Deaths occur, as they must, but the colony persists. Funerals are small, reflective, and practical, yet they reinforce social bonds and continuity. New residents, young apprentices, and births ensure that life continues even as older generations fade. Continuity, not triumph, defines existence here. Every day lived, every task completed, every season survived contributes to the colony's enduring structure. As summer returns, residents prepare gardens, mend homes, and perform maintenance. Life moves forward in measured repetition, guided by accumulated wisdom. Even in the face of illness, deprivation, and social isolation, the residents demonstrate remarkable adaptability. Their endurance is quiet, unglamorous, and rarely recognized, yet it is essential. They maintain life in a way few outside could comprehend, bridging the gap between vulnerability and survival with constant diligence. And then there is the legacy. Though medieval chronicles rarely mention individual residents, the colony itself represents a form of resilience that outlives the frailty of bodies. Skills, routines, and adaptations are passed down, creating continuity and stability in a population often marginalized by broader society. The very existence of these communities demonstrates a human capacity for order, cooperation, and perseverance in the harshest circumstances. By the time you step away from the colony, its walls fade into memory, yet the lessons remain vivid. Endurance is quiet, survival is methodical, and dignity can persist even under relentless constraint. The leper colony may never be celebrated in history books, yet its residents embody an extraordinary perseverance, demonstrating that life can continue and even